groove for transverse sinus, and superior to internal occipital protuberance, there is another groove for superior sagittal sinus. The internal surface of occipital is divided 4 chamber. Superior chamber is related to occipital lobe of brain, and inferior chamber here is related to cerebellum lobe. Okay. This is the basilar part. Basilar part is a quadrangular part. It's located anterior to foramen magnum, and in the superior surface, its shape of groove. The name of groove is clivus. Clivus is a location for passing pons. Pons is a part of brainstem, and the inferior surface of basilar part is here, and in the inferior surface there is a tubercle. This tubercle is called pharyngeal tubercle. Actually, pharyngeal tubercle is a location for attaching pharyngeal membrane, pharyngeal ligaments is attached here. You can see foramen magnum, squamous, and basilar part. This is the lateral part of occipital bone. Actually, in the lateral part, in the external surface, you can see occipital condyle is a blue part. Occipital condyle is attached to first cervical vertebra and forms the atlanto-occipital joint. And posterior to occipital condyle, there is a fossa as a condylar fossa, and inside or inner the fossa, you can see a condylar canal. This is the condylar canal. And finally, in the lateral part, there is a notch here, jugular notch, and you can see a jugular process. This is the jugular process and jugular notch. You can see lambdoid suture and sagittal suture. Near the lambdoid suture, there is some wormen or some sutural bone. This is a small and flat. Flat bone is located nearing the lambdoid suture. And in this slide, you can see lateral part of occipital bone on the internal surface. In the internal surface, there is a tubercle, jugular tubercle, and you can see a foramen, hypoglossal canal or hypoglossal foramen for passing hypoglossal nerve. This is the part of lateral part of occipital bone. And jugular notch is by the temporal bone form the jugular foramen between each bone, temporal and occipital bone. Before I explain about sphenoid bone, I show some video for understanding the frontal, occipital, and parietal bone. For showing the video, I share the screen my laptop. Please feedback me if you see the screen of my laptop. One student, please feedback me.
In this first,
can you see the video? Please, one student active the microphone and feedback me. Guys?
Doctor.
Thank you.
section, we'll look at the way the head is attached to the body and how it moves. We'll start by looking at the bones that are involved, then we'll look at the joints and ligaments that connect them. After that, we'll look at the muscle. The bones that are involved in support and movement of the head are the thoracic and cervical vertebrae, the upper ribs, the clavicles, and this part of the underside of the skull that's called the occiput. The skull consists of the cranium and the facial skeleton. The cranium is the bony container for the brain and the foundation for the facial skeleton. The cranium is made up of a number of originally separate bones. These lines of fusion, known as sutures, show where the bones are joined. The principal bones that form the cranium are the occipital bone behind and below, the parietal bone, and temporal bone on each side, the sphenoid bone, and the frontal bone. The two bones of the cranium that we're concerned with at present are the occipital bone and the lower part of the adjoining temporal bone. To see the full extent of the occipital bone, we'll take the mandible out of the picture. The occipital bone extends all the way from here at the back to here underneath. The most striking feature of the occipital bone is this large opening.
You can see a foramen magnum, basilar part, lateral part, and squamous part.
The foramen magnum, through which the spinal cord and its accompanying structures pass. The part of the occipital bone in front of the foramen magnum is called the basilar part, often referred to as the base of the occiput. The two temporal bones converge on it from each side. We'll look at them in a minute. Let's look at the occipital bone on the inside in a skull that's been divided in the midline. Here's the foramen magnum. Here's the basilar part of the occipital bone. It slopes forwards and upwards, more steeply on the inside than on the underside, since it's triangular in sagittal section. Let's look at some more details in a skull that hasn't been colored. On each side of the anterior half of the foramen magnum are the two occipital condyles. The occipital condyles are the joint surfaces which articulate with the atlas vertebra to form the atlanto-occipital joints. We'll look at these joints in a minute. The The outline of the front and the top of the cranium is well known to us from our everyday observation of surface anatomy. It's perhaps surprising to see how far round the back of the cranium curves and what an extensive overhang there is behind. The overhang is formed by the part of the occipital bone that's behind the foramen magnum, the squamous part. The overhang is obscured by the neck muscles that are attached to this broad area on the occipital bone. The bone bears the marks of their attachment. This lump in the middle is the external occipital protuberance. This faint ridge, leading out toward the mastoid process, is the superior nuchal line. Below it is the inferior nuchal line. We'll meet the structures that are attached here later in this section. Let's take a brief look at the occipital and temporal bones from the inside. Here's the squamous part of the occipital bone. Here's the basilar part. Here's the foramen magnum. Here's the squamous part of the temporal bone. Here's the petrous part, which contains the structures of the inner and middle ear.
This is the jugular foramen. This jugular foramen is produced between the occipital bone and temporal bone. This is the jugular notch and connected near the temporal bone and produce or forms the jugular foramen.
Here's the jugular foramen on the inside. This big groove behind it is for the sigmoid sinus, the main venous drainage channel for the brain. Below and medial to the jugular foramen is the hypoglossal canal. Above the jugular foramen is the internal auditory meatus,
It's not
the vestibular
important for
cochlear
decision
and facial nerves.
because it's the temporal bone.
The carotid canal ends here at the foramen lassum.
And it's not important for decision.
Now that we've looked at the shape of, look at the pictures that we've, there are the frontal and zygomatic bones, the maxilla, the sphenoid bone, and the ethmoid bone. The frontal bone is a very large bone. The lower part of the frontal bone forms the beginning of the root of the nose, the upper part of the orbital margin, a small part of the temporal fossa, and a large part of the roof of the orbit. The frontal bone also forms most of the floor of the anterior cranial fossa. The part of the frontal bone near the midline is hollow. The hollow space is the frontal sinus, one of the paranasal sinuses, which we'll look at shortly. Next, we'll look at the zygomatic bone. The zygomatic bone forms the bony prominence.
It's not important, zygomatic.
It's the lower medial part of the orbit.
Okay. Here you can see frontal crest for attaching cerebral folds, and you can see U-shaped structure between orbital plate. This U-shaped structure is ethmoidal bone. The white bone is ethmoid bone, is located inside the U-shaped structure or ethmoidal notch, and you can see the foramen cecum. Foramen cecum is formed between frontal bone and ethmoidal bone. This is the foramen cecum.
The part of the frontal bone near the midline is hollow. The hollow space.
Okay. If you have a question, you can ask the question, and you have 5 minutes for break after the rest. you come back to the class and I continue sphenoid bone. I'm here for answer the question if you have a question. Okay, 10 minutes. You're welcome. Before the starting, please answer the poll, the question. Please select the number A, B, C, and D. Question is, which of the structure is located in lateral part of occipital bone? A, pharyngeal tubercle, B, clivus, C, hypoglossal canal, and D, inium. Please answer it. All of the students answer the question. Don't type of answer the question in public chat. Please select the number. Please select the A, B, and C or D choice. Thank you. 15 students answer right and answer correct. Thank you. Pharyngeal hypoglossal canal is located in lateral part of occipital bone, but pharyngeal tubercle is located basilar, and clivus is located basilar part, and inium is located the squamous part of occipital bone. Thank you. Another question is what's the name of junction of coronal suture with sagittal suture? Please answer it. What's the name of junction of sagittal suture with coronal suture? Hurry up. Bregma, thank you, Fatima. I put your positive point for you. For the first person, answer the question. Fatima Tabassum. Okay. And the last question. Who is volunteer for explain the nasion, inion, and petrium? If anybody is volunteer, please activate the microphone and answer this question. Where is the nasion, inion, and petrium? Who is volunteer? Please activate the microphone. Musin Ahmad, yes. Please answer it. You should unmute the microphone. After that, Explain. If you enter the class with headset, you can't speak. Please exit the class and enter again and activate the microphone. And with microphone choice, enter the class, not headset. We wait. Mohsin. Yes. Mohsin. Yes. Mohsin, I watch you. No, you should open the microphone, not me. Please exit the class. When enter the class, choice or select the microphone. You can right-click and unmute your microphone. Another person answer the question. محدثة. محدثة, yes. Unmute your microphone, please. Yes, you are mute, but you can unmute microphone. Please right-click and select the unmute. Okay, that's good. محدثة. Can you yes? Can you explain about this or محدثة? About the nation, Patreon, and Union. Where is this? محدثة, you can speak because.
Excuse me, doctor, I don't know.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay. Lubna Nabi, don't worry. I put your recorded file link for representative, and she sent the link for other student. I ask you is easy question. Where is Union? Union is central point of external occipital protuberance. I ask you, where is atrium or pterium? It's H structure. It's located the lateral surface of skull, and its location for junction of frontal bone, parietal bone, temporal bone, sphenoid bone is very, very easy. And another question, is about, I think, Nasion. Nasion. Nasion is the midpoint of frontonasal suture. That's very easy. Okay. I continue the other subject, and the last bone is sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone. Thanks for answer the question, Abrar Matni and Tabassum Fatima. Thank you, but I answer it. Sphenoid bone is complicated bone. It's very, very important. And please pay attention to this complicated bone. Sphenoid bone has a central part or body, and it has several projections, such as a lesser wing, this lesser wing, such as greater wing, and trigoid process. This is a trigoid process. So it's divided 4 parts: body or central part, lesser wing, greater wing, and trigoid process. Sphenoid bone is butterfly, is like butterfly. This is a sphenoid bone. It's here. It's like butterfly bone, and it's a single bone and from the base of skull, from the part of orbital cavity, and it's very, very important bone. In internal surface, you can see body, you can see lesser wing and greater wing. Please answer this question. In internal surface or base of the skull, can you see a trigoid process? In internal surface, can you see trigoid process in this picture? Several number of students answer yes. Really, you can see trigoid process in internal surface. This is a trigoid process. Where are there? I can see trigoid process in this picture. But 16 students answer correct. Thank you. In internal surface, there aren't trigoid process. And at first, I explained about body of sphenoid bone. The body of sphenoid has a 3 surface: anterior surface, superior surface, and inferior surface. On the anterior surface, you can see a sphenoidal crest, and it has a chamber for sphenoidal sinus